Today's February 28th. Today's quote is entitled, "A little more like the pure devotees." How do you feel when you hear about the exalted qualities of pure devotees, their amazing tolerance, compassion, or forgiveness? Do you feel that you could never be like this and thus not relate to those stories? Could those stories even discourage you, making you feel even more impure? This is possible, but when we hear of the qualities and activities of exalted devotees, we need to ask ourselves, how could I be a little more like them? What could I do to be a little more tolerant, detached, or kind? The reason I brought up this point is because I've noticed in myself, and I've noticed in other devotees, that sometimes when we hear of the amazing qualities of the pure devotees, it's so far beyond where we are, or so far beyond anything we've heard of anyone on this planet ever doing or being, that we might look at it and say, this is impossible. I could never be like this. I don't even understand how this is supposed to inspire me, because it's like I'm learning to jump, high jump. So I'm a little kid, I'm 10 years old, and my big brother comes and he jumps 7 feet. And I'm only 4.5 feet. And so maybe I could jump 4 feet or 3 feet to start with. So I see him jump 7, and if he says jump 7, I'm like, why even try? It's impossible. So it becomes discouraging. So in the same way, sometimes we hear about the exalted qualities of these great devotees, and it can be discouraging. But it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. What we're supposed to take away from this is asking these questions, as I asked here. How could I be a little bit more like that? What could I do to be a little bit more like Ambarish Maharaj? A little more forgiving, like Ambarish was for Durvasa. A little more compassionate, like Prahlad Maharaj was for his father, who tried to kill him, and he's showing compassion. How could I be a little bit more like Thakur Haridas, who was praying for people who were hurting him or actually trying to kill him? How could I be a little bit more like this devotee, or a little more humble like this devotee, like Sanatana Goswami, who was so humble when he approached Mahaprabhu, that it melted Mahaprabhu's heart? And we don't have that kind of humility, but the question we have to ask ourselves when we hear these pastimes and we become aware of these exalted qualities is, what could I do right now, not to be like that, not to imitate that, but to be a little more like that? Because certainly I can be a little more like that. Absolutely, no question. So what can I do to be a little more like that? That's the question we want to ask ourselves. So when you read these stories, don't tell yourself, I could never be like that, and give up, but ask yourself, how could I be a little more like that? And then allow these stories to inspire you. Not to imitate, to be a little more like that, not to discourage you in thinking I could never be like that, but to motivate you. And another thing I think is really important that these stories do is they endear us to those qualities. A lot of us have difficulty practicing humility because we're not actually that attracted to being humble. In the back of our mind, we think, if I'm humble, I'll be in a disadvantage. People will walk over me. I'll never move forward. It doesn't look attractive. Or why should I be so compassionate when people aren't that compassionate towards me? But when we see these qualities manifest in these great devotees, it generally, or it should, help us become more attracted to those qualities. Because unless we're attracted to those qualities, we won't want to develop them. So that's the beginning of wanting to develop, the beginning of developing a quality is wanting to have that quality, being attracted by that quality. So that's very important. So that's another aspect of hearing. We see these exalted qualities and we think, wow, that's amazing. I would love to be like that. And so then the compassion, the resentment, the forgiveness, the humility, etc., becomes attractive. I would like to be that way. And that's very, very important in developing qualities of a Vaishnava, that we have to be inspired to develop them. We can't think, oh, people will walk over me, or it's impossible, or how would my life be if I was like that? No, we have to think that would be amazing if I could live that way.